So you're in a serious denial situation here, it seems to me. The stand-up comedian has views. He has views about global affairs. He has views about the national economy. He has views about the government and how it's going to be run. He has views which will be reflected in the personnel that he puts in positions of power and influence going forward. I'm doing well. I'm just wondering how you are doing. Have you recovered from the election in which much of your vituperation against Trump was refuted by the voters?
I had no idea that it was going to be that landslide, and I have processed it. It is very hard for me to have seen that and to feel good about my country. It's hard. It's really hard because all the things that I've said about him, I still believe and am seeing borne out. But if that many people see him as the better choice, then it's my job to try to put myself in their heads and understand why this happened.
Whoa. I mean, that's a very significant concession, John.
Well,
I mean, perhaps you could have done that years ago and you would have been
because
more in touch with what's going on in your country.
Part of wrapping my head around it, though, frankly, is remembering that most human beings don't follow, quote unquote, the news closely. And I completely understand that. I completely understand it. I'm not a political junkie myself, as I'm sure shows sometimes. So if you vote on the basis of your groceries, I can't look down on that if you've got other stuff to do and it was really just about inflation. If you have a major issue with the broken immigration system and that's your main point, that's not part of my life, despite the fact that I live among immigrants. But if that's your main issue, I get it. I get having a wedge issue. That doesn't account for all of the population, but to be honest, I think it counts for most of it. And I'm not pulling some H.L. Mencken and saying that everybody is a boob. That's not what I mean. It's just that if you're not that into who's going to be picked as attorney general and things like that, I get that Trump is a great stand-up comedian, for one, and that if he says he's going to fix inflation, if you only have so much attention to pay, you figure, well, that maybe he's a clown, but he'll do it. I get it. I can't hate America for that. For those who pay more attention, it is harder for me. It's about priorities. And I wrote a Times piece about this. How do you rank things? If you vote for Trump, it doesn't mean you're a racist. It just means that you rank racism lower than you rank other things. And I, of all people, understand that. I think America gets too hung up on, quote unquote, systemic racism in particular. So that's where I am on it. But I had to work hard the next day not to think, what country am I in? But it's counterintuitive that the whole country would be crazy or racist or sexist or anything like that. So I had to think, okay, how can I make my peace with this? And I pretty much have.
I hear no criticism of the losing party, the Democrats, the candidate, the establishment that stood behind the candidate, the attitudes. I mean, the out-of-touch coastal elites who arrogantly thought they could lecture the rest of the country about what was right and wrong on some of the issues that you've mentioned, immigration, for example. Paul Krugman, I think of, just offhand, lecturing from your newspaper, the New York Times, the country, to the effect of, inflation really isn't nearly as bad as people think it is. The economy really is doing much better than the pollsters tell us that people think it is, and so on. Is there any sense of remorse or criticism of your class? Again, this is a position that I identify you with. They're sitting there in New York City.
I'm going to make people mad again. No, frankly, I have tried to look as closely as I can at the extent to which hyper-wokeness and trans issues and a sense of Democrats as lecturing people they consider beneath them swayed the election. And from what I've seen, not meaningfully. I honestly think that the idea that Democrats looked down on the woman running the liquor store in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania that I'm always talking about, and that she voted for Trump because she felt like he likes her, That is something we talk about more than that woman running the liquor store is thinking about. And exit polling seemed to show it. It was inflation, it was immigration, and it was that Trump seems real, which is, what you might be thinking when you're trying to run a liquor store and you have kids. I really don't think that the Democrats did anything wrong, except I think obviously Biden should have dropped out earlier, but how could he have? What human being, what King Lear sees himself tottering a little bit and steps aside? I think that's a lot to ask of someone. And you can't feel how he's inside of himself and he's in a little bit of denial. I'm 59 and I can see that coming. So that wasn't going to happen. Now, anointing Kamala Harris, that was unideal. However, I think that she had her message out very clearly what she wanted to do for working and struggling people. She said it over and over again, but she didn't have the charisma that the stand-up comedian had. She stumbled a little at the beginning, but she wasn't opaque by the end.
Stand-up comedian.
He's great at
the
it.
Stand-up comedian. So you're in a serious denial situation here, it seems to me. The stand-up comedian has views. He has views about global affairs. He has views about the national economy. He has views about the government and how it's going to be run. He has views which will be reflected in the personnel that he puts in positions of power and influence going forward. The stand-up comedian actually is a political phenomenon, and you're in, it seems to me, serious denial to the extent that you refuse to acknowledge and try to understand what that political phenomenon is. Make America Great Again is now the governing mantra of the party that controls not just the presidency, not just the Supreme Court, but both houses of Congress, of the party that won a landslide election in your country. Man, wake up.
MAGA is a hysterical, mean-spirited, anti-empirical, little 14-year-old boy wearing axe fantasy. It has nothing to do with any kind of reality, the vision of America that man puts forward. And his views consist of, honestly, somebody who thinks he's playing a game of Risk rather than dealing with the real world. I mean, the old Milton Bradley, or maybe it was Parker Brothers game. And as for this deep state business, his views are all about that. This deep state that doesn't exist, which is really just people who don't like him that he wants to get back at. That's all he is. And I'm sorry, that is what I believe. I'm not being reductive. And I do see his main talent, because he isn't a good businessman. His main talent is that he is great at the podium, which I have written, honestly, I think in an Atlantic piece back in 2016 or 17. That's the only thing in which he's competent. And it made a big difference.
He's driving the political conversation in your country, John. He's competent at that. He's competent at winning an election by a large margin. He's competent at that. He's competent at taking over a major Republican party and reshaping and redefining it. He's certainly capable of doing that.
He's capable in
He's
the way
back from the dead, man. I repeat. I mean, if it feels good, do it. I do stuff that feels good all the time, even though it perhaps isn't good for me or doesn't make any sense. If it feels good, if that's what you need to do to get through this, all right, my man, I'm with you. Go ahead in your delusion. But it's delusional. It's disconnected from reality.
No, this is not
Trump is probably the most important political figure in the last half century in American politics.
Was the most important virus of the 2020s. Yeah, it's a virus.